You know that little sponge sitting by your sink? The one you use to clean dishes, wipe spills, and maybe even scrub the counter when guests are coming over? Yeah, that one. Well, brace yourself because it's not just a sponge. It's basically a 5-star luxury hotel for germs. Most people think their kitchen sponge is harmless, maybe a bit gross after a few days, sure, but nothing too dramatic. But according to microbiologists, that soft, squishy thing is actually one of the dirtiest items in your entire home. Dirtier than your toilet seat. Dirtier than the trash can lid. Dirtier even than your pet's food bowl. And if that sounds like an exaggeration, well, science has receipts. The hidden microbial city in your kitchen. Let's start with something a bit mind-blowing. Researchers from the University of Furtwangen in Germany once decided to analyze the bacteria living in used kitchen sponges. They expected to find a few hundred bacterial colonies, maybe 1,000. They found billions. Yes, billions with a B, and not just a few friendly bacteria either. We're talking about serious, potentially harmful species like E. coli, Salmonella, Staphylococcus aureus, and Campylobacter, the kind of microbes that can cause stomach cramps, diarrhea, fever, and worse. Imagine each little pore of your sponge as a tiny apartment building. Each drop of leftover food, each bit of moisture from washing dishes, creates a warm, nutrient-rich, humid environment. Basically, the perfect breeding ground for microorganisms. When scientists examined those sponges under a microscope, what they saw looked like a cityscape. There were clusters, colonies, microbial neighborhoods, even different zones, where bacteria coexisted, competing or cooperating depending on conditions. It's like SimCity, but for germs. Why your sponge is so perfect for germs. So why exactly do sponges attract bacteria so much? It comes down to 3 simple things: moisture, warmth, and food residue. Moisture. Bacteria love water. A damp sponge is basically a swimming pool for microbes. Warmth. Your kitchen's ambient temperature, especially after washing dishes with warm water, is right in the bacteria's comfort zone. Food residue. Every crumb, every drop of soup, every microscopic piece of pasta becomes dinner for them. Now add time. You probably don't throw away your sponge every day, right? Maybe once every week, 2 weeks, maybe longer. During that time, bacteria are living, eating, multiplying, and they can double their population in just 20 minutes. So within one evening of washing dishes, your sponge might already contain millions of bacterial cells. By the next day, billions. And the wildest part, even if you rinse the sponge with hot water, squeeze it dry, or pour soap over it, most of them survive. Some bacteria can withstand extreme conditions. They form protective layers called biofilms, which act like armor. So even when you think your sponge is clean, it's more like battle-hardened. But I microwave my sponge, so I'm safe. Yes, the famous microwave trick. You've probably heard it before. Pop your sponge in the microwave for a minute to kill bacteria. And it does work, sort of. Microwaving a damp sponge can kill a lot of bacteria, but not all. In one study, researchers discovered that while most ordinary bacteria die off, the tougher, more heat-resistant species actually survive, and those survivors then multiply even faster, since all their competition was wiped out. It's like natural selection in your kitchen. You're basically breeding a super sponge. And don't even get started on the smell. If your sponge smells funky, kind of sour, phallic, or like an old towel, that's not just a smell. That's the scent of bacterial waste. Yes, really. Everyday habits that make it worse. Here's where things get interesting, because most of us are guilty of making our sponges way dirtier than they need to be, just through everyday habits. Using the same sponge for everything. One minute you're wiping the counter after cutting raw chicken, the next you're cleaning a coffee mug. Congratulations, you just gave E. coli a grand tour of your kitchen. Leaving the sponge wet overnight. That's basically like leaving the light on at a bacteria nightclub. They'll party all night long. Storing it near the sink drain. Every splash of dirty dishwater just adds more microbes to the mix. Not replacing it often enough. Most people wait until the sponge looks bad or smells weird. but by then, it's already a microbial metropolis. And just to put things in perspective, scientists found that a single cubic centimeter of sponge about the size of a sugar cube can contain as many bacteria as there are people in Europe. Let that sink in for a second. But wait, aren't some bacteria good? Yes, technically, not all bacteria are bad. Your body, your food, even your home are filled with microbes that are harmless or even beneficial. But here's the catch. In the ecosystem of a dirty sponge, the harmful ones tend to win. It's too moist, too nutrient-rich. It favors fast-growing, opportunistic bacteria like E. coli and Pseudomonas. So even if a few harmless bacteria live there, the nasty ones quickly take over. Think of it like a bad neighborhood. It only takes a few troublemakers to ruin the place for everyone. The invisible spread. Here's where the real danger comes in. It's not just what's inside the sponge, but what the sponge touches. Each time you wipe the counter, you're not cleaning, you're actually painting a thin invisible film of bacteria across the surface. You might think you're removing the dirt, but you're really just spreading it around like butter on toast. Next time you set a spoon or slice of bread there, boom, contamination. And since many kitchen bacteria can survive for hours, some even for days on dry surfaces, it's a perfect setup for cross-contamination. That's how foodborne illnesses often start, not from eating expired food, but from tiny, invisible traces of bacteria spread by something as innocent looking as a sponge. So, we already know your kitchen sponge is like a luxury hotel for germs. But who's actually living there? Let's pull back the microscopic curtain and meet the tiny tenants that have made your sponge their forever home. And trust me, once you know who they are, you'll never look at your dish sponge the same way again. The classic villain, E. coli kitchen bacteria, had a most wanted list. Escherichia coli would be right at the top. You've probably heard of it before, usually in the context of contaminated food or water. Well, surprise! It can also thrive in your sponge. E. coli comes from, how do I put this nicely, fecal matter. That's right. If you're washing dishes that had raw meat, especially beef or chicken, or even rinsing vegetables that touch contaminated soil, E. coli can end up in your sink, and from there, straight into your sponge. Once it's there, it doesn't just chill quietly, it multiplies fast. And if you use that same sponge to wipe the countertop where you place bread or fruit later, you've just set up a perfect opportunity for foodborne illness. Now, not every strain of E. coli will make you sick. Some are harmless. But the bad ones? They can cause severe stomach cramps, vomiting, fever, and even kidney complications. So, yeah, next time someone says, a little dirt never hurt, maybe remind them that E. coli feels exactly the same way it loves a dirty sponge. The sneaky one, Salmonella. Salmonella, the bacteria that's practically synonymous with food poisoning, usually linked to undercooked chicken or raw eggs. But again, once it hits your sink, it's got one more stop to make: the sponge. What's sneaky about Salmonella is how tough it is. It can survive in moist environments for up to 2 weeks. So even if your sponge dries out a bit, Salmonella is still there, just biding its time, waiting for the next splash of warm dishwater. And when you pick up that sponge to wipe the counter, it happily hitches a ride to wherever you go next. A few of these bacteria on a surface probably won't harm you, but in a sponge, where the population can reach billions, it's like multiplying your chances of infection by 1,000. The opportunist, Staphylococcus aureus, Staphylococcus aureus, or staph, is a bacteria that actually lives on human skin. Totally normal, everyone has it, but it becomes dangerous when it gets into your body through a cut, wound, or even a small scrape. Now, think about how often your hands touch the sponge, especially if you have tiny cuts or hangnails. If you're washing dishes and handling raw meat or food, the bacteria can easily transfer from your hands to the sponge, where it starts to multiply. Under the right conditions, moist, warm, nutrient-rich staph becomes a menace. It can cause skin infections, boils, and in rare cases, even serious bloodstream infections. You wouldn't expect that from your cheerful yellow sponge, right? The tough survivor, Pseudomonas aeruginosa. If bacteria were superheroes, Pseudomonas would be the one that just refuses to die. It thrives in moist, oxygen-poor environments, making your sponge a dream come true. What makes Pseudomonas special is its ability to form biofilms, those slimy, invisible layers of bacteria that stick to surfaces and protect themselves from soap, disinfectants, and heat. Basically, your sponge can look clean, smell fine, and still be coated in a thin microbial shield. In hospitals, Pseudomonas is notorious because it causes infections in wounds, lungs, and urinary tracts, and it's often resistant to antibiotics. That's how strong it is. Now imagine you've got millions of those in the sponge you use to clean your cutting board. Fun thought, huh? The foodie. Campylobacter jejunithis, one's less famous, but no less nasty. Campylobacter jejuni loves raw chicken and undercooked meat, and once again, the sponge is its favorite second home. It only takes a few hundred cells to make you sick, which is nothing when you think about how many can live in one sponge. Symptoms? Let's just say they're unforgettable: diarrhea, stomach cramps, fever, and sometimes long-term gut issues. What's worse, Campylobacter doesn't even need to multiply inside the sponge to be dangerous. Even traces can cause illness when transferred to kitchen surfaces. The weird ones, Moraxella, Acinetobacter, and friends. In 2017, huge study of used sponges found over 360 different types of bacteria, many of which were totally unexpected. Scientists found weird ones like Moraxella oslansis, usually found on human skin, and associated with that dirty laundry smell. In fact, that sour, metallic scent your sponge develops after a few days. That's often Moraxella doing its thing. They also found Acinetobacter, another hardy species that's resistant to many disinfectants and antibiotics. It's fascinating. Honestly, your kitchen sponge is basically like a rainforest ecosystem, full of life, constantly changing, and sometimes terrifying. Here's a crazy experiment. Researchers collected 14 used kitchen sponges from real homes and compared them under the microscope to samples from toilets. Guess which had more bacteria? Yep, the sponges. In fact, they had up to 200,000 times more bacteria per cubic inch than a toilet seat. They also found that even if people tried to clean their sponges regularly, boiling, microwaving, soaking in vinegar didn't make much difference. Some of the most bacteria-packed sponges were from households that cleaned them the most often. Why? Because each time you clean it, you're basically creating a survival of the fittest environment. The weaker bacteria die, the stronger ones survive, adapt, and rebuild their colony. Congratulations! You've just evolved a generation of super bacteria in your kitchen. Everyday scenarios you've probably done. Let's be honest, we've all done at least one of these. Used the same sponge to wash cutting boards and plates. Wiped up, spilled chicken juice with it. Just once, right? Rinsed it under hot water and thought, good enough. Left it sitting in a puddle of water overnight. Used it to wipe the table before serving food. Each of those is basically a mini bacterial festival. You might not get sick every time, but the odds stack up. And it's not about being dirty, it's about not realizing how microscopic life works. Once you see it like a microbiologist does, every squeeze of the sponge feels different. What actually happens when you use the sponge every time you wipe a plate or a countertop? Two things happen. You remove visible debris. Yay. You transfer invisible bacteria from the sponge to the surface. Not yay. When that surface dries, the bacteria just chill out, waiting for moisture or contact to reactivate. Some can survive for days, even on dry counters. And when you wash dishes again, the sponge picks up more food particles, more bacteria, and the cycle continues. The irony? Your sponge is supposed to clean, but statistically, it's one of the dirtiest tools in the house. But isn't dish soap antibacterial? You'd think so. It's soap, right? Well, not exactly. Most regular dish soaps are designed to break down grease and food, not kill bacteria. They help loosen grime, but they don't disinfect. Even antibacterial soaps have limits. They might kill some bacteria, but if your sponge has a biofilm, It's basically a microbial bunker. The soap can't get through that slimy layer. So even when you feel that squeaky clean texture, it's not sterile clean. It's just physically cleaner, but microbiologically, it's still a germ party. Alright. So now, you know your sponge is basically a bacterial city. It's moist, warm, and full of food everything microbes dream of. But don't panic and throw everything in your kitchen away just yet. Let's start with the toughest truth. You can't fix an old sponge. Once bacteria move in, there's no true way to make it sterile again, even if you nuke it in the microwave or boil it like a pasta noodle. Those tricks can reduce bacteria temporarily, but they can't kill everything. Microbiologists say that sponges should be replaced every week. Yeah, that's right, weekly. If that sounds extreme, just think about it like this. Would you keep using the same toothbrush for months without rinsing it properly? Exactly. So, once a week, toss it. If it smells weird, feels slimy, or looks darker than when you bought it, it's time. Pro tip: buy sponges in multi-packs. Think of them as disposable cleaning gadgets, not lifelong companions. Okay, so you're not ready to say goodbye yet. Fair. Here's how you can reduce the bacteria load temporarily. While you still have it around, microwave it carefully. Make sure the sponge is damp, not dry, or it'll catch fire, no joke. Heat it for about 1 minute on high. This can kill up to 99% of some bacteria, but again, not all, especially not the hardy ones, like Pseudomonas. Run it through the dishwasher. Place it on the top rack during a hot cycle. The combination of detergent and heat helps. It's not perfect, but it buys you a little time. Soak it in bleach solution. Mix about 1 tablespoon of bleach per liter of water. Soak the sponge for 5 minutes, then rinse thoroughly. This kills many types of bacteria, but again, not biofilm formers. All these methods are temporary. Think of them as spot treatments, not cures. Bacteria hate dryness. They thrive in moisture. So the easiest way to slow down their party is to cut off their water supply. After each use, squeeze the sponge until it's nearly dry. Store it in an open, airy spot. Not in the sink, not in a puddle. If possible, place it upright so air can circulate. Even just letting it dry faster can reduce bacterial growth by more than half. And never, ever leave it soaking in a bowl of water overnight. That's basically a spa treatment for germs. Most people use one sponge for everything: dishes, counters, stove, sink. That's like using one towel for your dishes and your dog. Set up a simple system: yellow sponge dishes only, blue sponge counters only, green scrub pad, tough stuff, like pans. Label them if you want, or just remember by color. It helps prevent cross-contamination, meaning you won't spread raw meat bacteria onto your clean plates. Sponges aren't the only way to clean dishes. There are actually some great low-bacteria alternatives that scientists love. Silicone scrubbers, they dry faster and don't absorb food particles. You can toss them in the dishwasher every day. They last much longer and harbor fewer bacteria. Microfiber cloths. They pick up dirt really well, but also dry fast. Just remember to wash them regularly in hot water. Compostable dish brush made of bamboo or coconut fibers. Easier to rinse and replace, plus eco-friendly. Each of these options reduces moisture retention, meaning germs get fewer places to hide. Let's talk about habits. Because really, it's not the sponge's fault, it's how we use it. Here are a few practical tweaks. Wipe before you wash. Scrape off leftover food before using the sponge. The less organic matter, the less fuel for bacteria. Use paper towels or wipes for raw meat spills. Never the sponge. Ever. Disinfect your sink regularly. The sink is where sponges refuel. Keep it clean to stop recontamination. Airflow matters. Kitchens with poor ventilation stay moist longer, and that helps bacteria. If you can, keep windows open after washing dishes or run a fan. Here's a weird but true thought: your relationship with your sponge says a lot about how you think about clean. People tend to trust things that look clean, bright, foamy, and scented. But that feeling can be deceptive. In studies, participants rated sponges that smelled like detergent as clean, even when bacterial counts were off the charts. It's a reminder that cleanliness isn't just about sight or smell, it's about microscopic reality. Maybe the dirtiest part of your kitchen isn't the sponge itself, but our tendency to assume it's fine just because it feels clean. You might be wondering, why 1 week? Why not 2 or 3? Researchers found that by day 7, a typical kitchen sponge already has 100 million to 1 billion bacterial cells per cubic inch, multiple resistant species surviving cleaning attempts, and biofilms that can't be washed away. By week 2, that population can double. By week 3, it's like a microbial metropolis. So when scientists say, change weekly, it's not arbitrary. It's based on exponential growth models. Replacing the sponge stops that curve before it explodes. Some people take it to the next level, especially in households with kids, elderly people, or anyone with weak immunity. Here's what microbiologists recommend in those cases. Use disposable cleaning pads instead of reusable sponges. Switch to dish brushes that can be sanitized in boiling water. Disinfect countertops daily with diluted bleach or alcohol-based cleaners. Dry dishes with paper towels instead of cloth towels. It might sound like overkill, but if someone in the house gets frequent stomach bugs, this can help break the invisible cycle. Here's the crazy part: your sponge isn't just a cleaning tool. It's a tiny model of microbial ecosystems that exist all around us. Researchers actually used sponges to understand how bacteria evolve and cooperate. Inside a sponge, bacteria form communities. Some species protect others, some compete, and some exchange genes to resist cleaners. It's like watching evolution happen on your countertop. So, yeah, your sponge is gross, but also kind of fascinating. It's a reminder that life thrives in the most unexpected places.